Hello and welcome back to Factorio. My name is abucnasty. In today's video, we're going to be covering purple science. This is a build that I've been dreading to a certain extent. There's a lot of complicated bits to this, and also it is probably one of the sciences that I currently have a hypothesis on that it's not better to make an uncommon. The main reason is just from the sheer amount of inputs that you need to bring in here, so you can just see just the amount of miners that are just creating the raw ore that is being transported. There's a couple things that I already know that I have effectively over-ratioed or overproducing right now iron, so a lot of these things can be removed. The same with stone. This build requires a lot of stone, and it's just an obscene amount. I mean, they're just looking here, first of all, this is 32 lanes of stone that we need to create. So one of the things that I want to cover in this video, and this is going to be a two-part episode. The first one is I want to design a better voiding machine or better miner for stone specifically. I think we can do that, and I have a couple different ideas on how to do that, so we'll go over that first in the video. But that's one thing that I know is inefficient is the stone voiding process, because we can easily void the materials making landfill and just making them in assemblers, and I'm thinking that's going to be a better route to go. The second part that I want to cover is these builds are massive. I think that this can be drastically shrunk down, and just looking at it in my extended zoom view here, this is an absolutely massive build, and the main reason is just in order to make uncommon materials like steel, you need to upcycle, or not upcycle everything, but you have to make them in furnaces. So this can be a lot more compact. Additionally, we learned in the chemical science video that making everything with advanced oil recipes is worse for UPS, so I'd like to get rid of this entire section and go to the older recipe. I may not cover that in this video specifically, so stay tuned for the second one where I will cover that. But ultimately what I'd like to do is redesign, for this video at least, the main objectives that I have, and maybe I'll get to some other things. I want to redesign the steel stack here to be a lot smaller, and I'd like the width to be smaller as well. I'd like to ultimately pass a lot of these materials that we're seeing on the top here through the middle section. A secondary thing that exists is you can see just by the speed of these belts, we are importing way too much for the actual science. So right now I'm over-ratioed. I only need like 5 of these stone inputs, I think, and I'm providing it with 6, so that's a little bit too much. So that means just, again, downstream I have too many miners. So that's something I'd like to optimize. And then finally, like, since we learned in the chemical science video, there's an overhead on rocket silos compared to using, our wonderful cursed train concept of directly inserting into cargo wagons. So I want to effectively remove all the rocket silos. So per build here, there's 7 rocket silos that are being used. I'd like to eliminate all of them so that we don't have any potential interactions with the spaceships that are above. So just, if you didn't see the chemical science video, go look at that. I covered that a little bit more in depth, but just at a high level, every time that you're inserting things in and out of a rocket silo, so more especially down here, these little individual items go into any ship that is hovering over Novice, and they interact and they look for requests that potentially and that are on the surface. So for example, if I did, let's say, uncommon red circuits here, you can see that constantly right now there happen to be some available on the planet, so it's actually going to launch it, so I didn't want that, but you can see the numbers constantly floating because it's calculating all the available items in rocket silos below. So that's a reason for it. So that interaction I'd like to completely eliminate if we can. So for this video, what I'm thinking I'm going to cover is the new Q2 stone miner setup. I'd like to redesign that, benchmark that, and see if we can make any improvements there. I'd like to go through and recreate the steel furnaces stack that's there, and then finally also go through and create the Q2 furnace assembler. So that is this module. In the next video, I'm going to cover doing red and green circuits, and then additionally the productivity modules, and then we'll get into the actual full tail module here to make the actual science. All right, so we're going to get now into the design. So in front of you, what you're seeing is a bill of materials of everything we're going to need. I've already, unlike other videos, I've already calculated all the ratios of everything we're going to need and put them in nice little display panels for us to think about. So I have not put every single total in here, but most of them that matter. So in the end, these are the 3 products we're going to need to feed the purple stuff. So in order to do that, the goal is for the full design is to make 240 items per second. We're going to just feed it the raw inputs that you're seeing here on the left, and ultimately that's going to create the end product on the right. So we have a couple different decisions to make. So in this video, I want to focus on a couple things, mainly because we're for the first time mining so much more stone than any other build. I want to redesign this concept, so create a new mining setup. The other one is I want to focus on the steel smelters because there's going to be so many of those. So if we can squeeze in and make it slightly smaller and more compact compared to other videos that I've done. So I'd like to do that. So see if we can create a new version for that. And then finally, I want to create a build that's going to make our wonderful Q2 electric furnaces. So without further ado, let's get into the first part and make a better design for mining stone. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to create a path for stone. So by the way, if you don't know how to get to the map editor, if you're in any game, you can just type in /editor and that will open up this menu here for you. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the resources. I've just cranked it up to have a higher richness for it, and then just you can slide this window however large you want. You can also use it with the same like sliding, you can bind it to hotkey if you want to make it bigger. So, okay, so we have some stone here. One of the things that I've done and have not updated my blueprints on yet is I've been focusing on this new kind of mining setup that I have here. So you click on it, select your ore type, and then it goes and works with it. It's just slightly more compact compared to previous versions. It has a little bit less inserters. And the main thing that I did to slow these down was I wound up adding a RS clock to it. So I'll release that at the end of this series, or like at the end of this video, so that everyone can access it. But if the inputs on the output is being consumed slower than 240 per second, this little clock here will basically just say, hey, if the items in this chest are above this amount, then it will basically stop the miner itself. It'll send a little sleep signal. So this is the base setup that I have used. So what I want to do is I want to redesign this and reimagine it a little bit and see if we can create a new setup. So let's do that. We're going to go with a clean slate here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out of this so I can get back to all my wonderful tools. So the first thing that I kind of want to experiment with is I'm going to grab this same blueprint here that already has effectively we'll just move it up here somewhere. And then I have a little deconstruction planer because it's really hard to delete these items that are underneath it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hook this up so that we can have everything filled in. So here you can see kind of in detail, I've already pre-planned this to have slots where they should and shouldn't go. And by the way, you can just grab any item, and the way that this works is if you have one of these that are blank, what you can do is you can hold Q on any item that is in the game, and if you're not an editor, it won't actually fill your inventory, but it does for me. And then you can middle mouse click the items that you want, and then that will put the slots in there. So you can do that with any item, for example, so you can put anything in here. So we're gonna use that a lot in this video, so that's why I wanted to cover it. So that already pre-covers the items that are gonna go in here as far as the slots go. The next thing that I wanna do is I wanna grab an assembler here. And what I'm going to want to do is we're just gonna stick as many speed modules in there as possible. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a landfill recipe and just the quality like the regular one. The reason is this can accept a lot more stone than any setup that we had over here, right? Because like this caps out at 593. And I know that like realistically, I can't really insert things faster into here, right? The only difference is that this is slightly more compact compared to a recycling machine, and it doesn't have to run as often. Because every single time you insert something into here, it has to immediately void it and destroy it. So the difference here is that this only has to run whenever the landfill reaches 50. So you can have the actual machine run a lot less frequently, which is probably better for UPS compared to a recycler that has to void all the time. So let's try this. I'm thinking that I'm going to effectively have some kind of a pattern here. So I'd like to design this so that this can fit kind of maybe something like this, and then we could have another one right next to it like that. So that will work. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do then is, yeah, this works like spacing wise. So the next thing that I'm going to want then is some kind of output for this. So I know this is not going to be enough because effectively in order to void this material, and I figured this out kind of previously, I know I'm going to need realistically already like 7 of these to destroy the material, because each one of these kind of caps out at 120 items per second. So that means realistically here we can only really throw 360 items from one directly inserting to another machine. So when stack inserters like this are running at full speed, they can run 120 items per second. So that means that we can void here a total of 720. And I know that we need to be slightly above that in like the 800 range due to math that I've done before. So I'm going to know that I'm going to need at least one more assembler on the side to kind of do this. And I'm like intentionally trying to get this as far away from the output as possible because I want to save some room for the inserters that are going to output items. So one of the things I'm going to grab is I already really like this setup that I had here. And I'm going to remove this red circuit because we don't need this anymore. I like this because that works with that RS latch so we can continue to use it. So what I'm thinking is just to save space, we can put it underneath here. I'll leave it up here just for now, just so that they can constantly input, and that will work. And the next thing that I'm gonna have to design is just like an output. So pretty simply what we could do is we could have this connected here and here. And then let's say we have this somehow coming out. So I don't really care how this works. This will go maybe here and here. And then finally what I can do is just to keep this, and we can think about redesign this some other way. This will come out maybe like this, and then these can merge together, and then they can be in an output. Let's keep this kind of more on the right-hand side. No particular preference, but just need to do that. So, okay, so that will guarantee we're getting 240 items per second. The next thing is I'm going to need some way to void. Right now, the reason the stopgap is here is because we need to void all the stone and materials that are in here. So for that, I can't read contents of a cargo wagon. So, and let me remove all my unfiltered items here just to clear my inventory. So we're just simply going to go in here. Let's use the filter and we're going to go for quality rare, and anything that is greater than or equal to rare, I'm going to throw away. So I'm going to put that. I can hide and sneak it under here. Cool. And then I'm going to need, and I'll just grab it from over here, I need something to void that material. So I could do this, and I could even have it facing in on itself. That would be kind of cool. So that may still get stuck, but let's see. We'll try that. Yeah, that works. That's good enough. So that works to kind of void that material. So I like that. All right, so now we're reaching the problem of the landfill being too high. So let's do something like this. So I'm gonna select a filter here, just mainly for my own visual purposes. And I'm gonna grab landfill. And I'm gonna want this, this has to go to recycler. I guess, let's simply do this. I'm gonna route it just somewhere else for now. So we can go here, come down here and void it and run that way. The reason I want to do that is because that also gives me an output here for this one when it occasionally runs. So that's good. And I'm going to need some place to destroy it. So since this one's not running as often, I guess I could directly put this in here. Let me see. Let's try this. We could do this setup because it's not going to run as often. It has the chance to get voided. Actually, let's see what happens. Like, does this recycle? Oh, that won't work because it recycles back into landfill. So that's a bummer. Okay, so we can't do that. I guess we could change all the recipes here to be stone furnaces instead. That's another option. So we could try that. I just know that the throughput is not going to be as high. So if I do this, you can see here, this can only take 187 items. So I'm going to need more beacons for this, and I'd like to avoid them if I can at all. And also the recycling time on stone furnaces is okay, it's 0.03 seconds. That's not bad. And the recycling time on landfill is also the same. So in practice, I guess we could do that. So let's do this. This seems to be working just fine, but we do need to add some speed beacons now to increase the speed of this, which is easy enough to add. And we're going to be limited a little bit on space, but just adding that beacon, yeah, this can easily exceed the amount that we wind up putting in here, so that's fine. So then this can go, all because, like, again, we're just targeting to be over 360, so that's okay. So now this is having, so now the problem with this is now, although this can handle it, we now need more inserters here because now the compaction is so much slower. So we need several more inserters to be able to void this. I guess what you could do is you could add another one. This is just the issue, is like, you're going to be getting, it's only 5 stone that you're getting, and you're going to have to stack all these stone furnaces. So these have to swing a lot more. Yeah, I don't like this design. This is cool. The problem is, it's just now you have to create so many more entities, and you can't void it fast enough. And that's, I think, the nice part about the previous version that we were trying here, is that this is a 50-to-1 compression ratio. So basically 50 items immediately just become 1 item. And so we can even iterate on this and make it slightly better, is we could go in here, and I could say here that, okay, I only want to enable, and let's make sure that we read the contents, and we don't need to include in crafting, that's fine. We could just say, hey, I just want to enable this whenever this is greater than 16. Then I just want it to swing. And we could even make it swing even less, so just whenever it's greater than 32, but it's not going to do much. It's just going to spread out how often it's running, so just greater than 16 is probably fine. So then that'll be a full swing, and we need one more for that side, so let's do this. Flip it, put it in here, and then I don't have to flip it, I can just flip it afterwards. So then what I'll do is, I know I don't need this inserter, so let me create a blueprint to specifically destroy those. And remove that, that's fine. I just have to remember to destroy it on the other one. So then finally what I'd like to do is, so this one's still gonna blink, and you can see the little red icons, that's like the active state that's there. This is still gonna be running whenever something's on the belt. And that's okay. I guess more what I'm interested about is like reading the contents of the belt that's right in front of it. So that's something we could do, is we could read this and just hold the values of that. So, and we'll just disable this for a second and see what that value gets up to. So we could say is, hey, whenever the items in front of you are greater than, I'll say greater than or equal to 16, I want you to be enabled. And I'll also read the hand contents just so that I continuously run whenever there's something in front of it. And I think that works. So let's run this at a little bit faster speed just to make sure that this never gets stuck. Yeah, it seems fine. Okay. So this seems pretty good. So what I can do then is I can copy this side here. And then I'm going to press H to flip it. And we can slice this in right there. Cool. Okay, so the reason this is even better is because now we just have one assembler or one machine to void effectively any of the landfill that we see. And this will blink occasionally just here whenever it's voiding stuff. So this one I can't really clock, but that's fine. I could set up a traditional clock just to kind of monitor how often this one's running, but these couple little blinks and pulses I don't think is going to matter all that much. So it seems like now we can check the inventory. Oh yeah, we are voiding stone way faster than needed. So this is completely fine. So let's compare back against the other version. This one's also in the same state. So this has this RS clocking logic, which I kind of like. Let's see if we can incorporate that over here. So what I'd like to do is monitor the items that are in here. The slightly annoying part is that I can't quite do what I was doing before because I can't, yeah, I don't have the space in here. And the way that this one works is because these bottom ones are constantly outputting. And then this is 120 items per second, but they can't actually drop 120 items per second from here onto the belt because they're limited by how fast it can go. So that's actually what allows us to start and stop. So let's see if we can incorporate something like that. So I'd like to be able to read this. And like ideally, I guess one thing we could do, because there is a free slot under here that we could use and we could get here. I don't know if like practically I can get to it. So if we move this slightly down, like we can go all the way down here, right? This doesn't matter. Doesn't make it quite as pretty, but because we can go in here like this, that's fine. But then that doesn't output as well. I guess that's fine. We could go be real sneaky and do that. All right, that works. But then that kind of avoids what I was trying to do anyway. So this is fine. We'll move this down. And the one thing that oh, you know what we could do? Yeah, I can just do that. Perfect. That'll work. Okay. And this can just be a regular one. That's fine. It's cheaper. Okay, so that goes down. Now we have a whole bunch more room to work with. I guess if I cut this and move this for a second, I know it's going to stop up here. I'm wondering if we can do something sneaky, because like I can still fit this down here, no problem. So let's remove, we'll keep this here, but I want to move this up. So let's say I move this all the way up here somewhere, and we did something like this, then I can move this all the way up. Perfect. And then I could output this maybe up here? Or I guess I could just directly insert this in here and let this guy just occasionally take care of it. That's fine. That could work. And then what else am I going to gain from that? Not much, but let's see if I can slot this maybe down here now. Okay. Does that gain me anything? Yeah, it gives me 2 spaces here, so I can do this and this. Okay, that's good. So let's see. So in order for that to work then, I would need... Ideally, I'd like it so that they're going to both sides of the belt. That would be ideal. I guess I could move this in here. I could move this whole thing up 1. That's fine. It means this one's going to run a little bit more often, but that's fine. This one's basically just going to be inserted and active on more. So we'll see if that works. Mainly because now I can fit this on this side, and that's pretty nice. And that happens to be aligned with this. So what we could do is we could remove these all together, and then we could have this come in here, this come in here. Okay, kind of like that design. And then if we wanted to be even more cheeky with this, we could move this guy down 1, potentially. Does that gain me anything? Yeah, it does, because then I can move this here. Cool. Move that there, move this here. By the way, I haven't designed this yet. I'm just doing this on the fly, so sorry if this is overly, this is taking too long. So, it doesn't really buy me anything. Oh, no, it does. Hold on, it does. I can do this. Yay! So... that allows me... oh, even better. This can perfectly fit. Nice. And then that will side load. This will come out. Perfect. So it gives me plenty of space up here for, I don't know, a module if I wanted it. Doesn't really matter. Okay. So now what I can do is I can monitor this. So I'm going to increase this cap a little bit. So now this is a condition where it's saying to sleep. So what I can do is... I can tell now and wire this back in here. And I can see this actually is stopping. And that kind of makes sense because it's now going to go until this buffer is reached. And then it'll effectively start over again the moment that it recognizes that these are going empty like this. So that's good. And now that actually gives, compared to the side on the right, you're seeing this is pulsing all the time. And this is actually going to allow this to completely stop whenever we overshoot it, because I think we are now voiding materials faster than we can actually bring them out. So there you go. That's kind of what I was looking for, is this behavior, this cycling on and off behavior. All right, let's add some power just to fully fill the entirety of the space here. Perfect. And then what I can do is I'm just going to copy this whole thing, flip it, put it in here like this. Nice. Okay, so then we have a version here, which I will save as a 480 miner. Go ahead and copy this, making sure to include the trains. Okay, so we have now two different versions. We have a 480 per second stone that is set up in this configuration, which we just designed. And I also have a 240 per second variant, or that is not 480, so this is 240, so just a half of it. So then that way you can fit both of them. It's nice because it's flippable, tileable, you can easily just add it on if needed. And then it'd be better to use the 480 when it already exists, because the main reason is this will use one less inserter here, so that's always a good thing. And then, you know, just place the output. So what I want to do then is, now that we have a decent design, and what I like about this is, like, we can easily fit them now right in line here, and I could easily just have these on any patch come out like this if I want to. Or even better, what we can do now is we can flip this and perfectly place all this in here. So now this is a really easy setup. So even if you have a relatively much smaller surface than before, so like if this is your entire mining footprint, you now can fit it on just a tiny patch like this. So that's pretty decent. So in terms of like the actual sizes are. So yeah, so I'm liking this design. Let's try to see what it looks like in an actual benchmark, and I want to compare it against the most UPS efficient version that I have, and also the one that I posted about in my upcycling video as well, and let's compare all those in a benchmark. So I created a quick benchmark for us to compare the new mining setup. So basically the way that this one works is each save file produced 96,000 uncommon stone per second. So I'll close the benchmark utility because that just ran. So, and I'll close this out to make this easier to read. So I had two different setups. One that was the first one that I showed my first upcycling or voiding video, the 480 version of it with using trains. Then the clocked version that I showed that was experimental. And then finally the landfill 480 miner. So all these output 480 per second. And so looking at the results here, well, the landfill recycling version, well, that one outperformed it by miles. So just looking at the actual percent differences here, it was a 73, almost 74% improvement. That means for the same amount of UPS that you're going to get, basically 25% of that is what's basically being consumed, essentially 26% compared to before. So that's already huge. And then the 480 clocked version, the RS clocked, helped a little bit, just turning on and off occasionally, but wow, this one is so much better. So cool. That is fantastic. So I'm gonna upload these results, and then I'll have the BP included in the video description where all my blueprints are. So that's fantastic. We got a way better stone mining setup. Great. All right, on to the next thing. So now that we have finished with stone, let's move over to steel. So we know that we're going to be needing to make 1,000 steel per second. It's a weird number because basically a lane can take fully stacked 240 items per second. So the best we can do is 960 items per second that are going to come out of a full belt. So we're going to need, basically for this, we're going to need, 4 belts and change effectively. And we're also just ratio wise, we're going to need a slightly less stone, but still about a similar amount of stone that we're going to need for this. So we kind of, looking at this just because of productivity and everything, we're going to need about 1,000 steel and about 800-ish stones. It's a weird ratio here. So like, let's see if we can figure something out here. So one of the things, this is in my previous inserter clocking video, I designed this steel furnace setup here. I'd like to make this a lot more compact because this is pretty wide. I think there's a couple ways that I want to do that. So the first one is I like this setup here that I already have. So let's copy this and I'll put the clocks in later. But one thing that when I was talking to Conage, he was explaining to me that it's slightly more UPS performant to constantly sideload undergrounds. And the way that that works is you can take like an existing underground that's like this, right? And you let it go until just effectively, let's say we run it along the side like this, cool. And then what you can do is you can run this belt here kind of around the corner of it. So even more compact, and that's what's nice about this. You can always side load things in here because it can come from the outside belt and then go in, and then this can go out. It's nice because it always unblocks the inserter to do a full swing and doesn't have to stop ever. So this is kind of a nice change that you can make. The next thing that I'm going to probably want to do then is let's move this a little bit further down. Let's have this here, and then let's try to fit as many beacons as we can around it. So before, the ratios that we're looking for is I could fit 11 beacons. I really don't want to compromise on that. And I'd like to boost the amount of beacons that are around this furnace. So let's try doing that here with a setup. So what I'm going to do is let's try to just first like focus on the steel smelter, and just to make this easy for us to look at visually, I will place this here and then there, and I will grab the same just input just so we can watch this. And there's no circuits here, so this will just run. Okay, and let's just grab a beacon and make this go faster. This is assuming that you have 300% productivity already researched, so keep that in mind. I have that in my base, so I can use it. But so that is going to be kind of our setup. This is going to come in here, and then it's going to go out here on the output. So I'm going to try to maximize the amount of beacons that fit around this steel furnace here. So we're going to put these around, and then what I'm going to try to do is fit these as tight as possible to the steel smelter itself. So then what I'm going to want then is let's try to fit some more beacons around here. So let's just compactly put this in as close as possible. And then we can fit this in here. So I'm just going to go with it offsetting everything and just trying to keep it as close as possible. We could move it one up, but I think I can fit more beacons by having this off by one kind of pattern like this. This already satisfies the condition of us having 11 of them. And then what I can do is now pretty simply, I can go all the way to the outside here corner and get this all the way in. This already gets us up to 7 beacons, which we already had before. But the nice thing is when you tile this, this will also fit here. So that'll get us up to 8 already, which is pretty nice. We could, yeah, we can't really fit more, but that means that this just has to run less often. So if we use this as kind of our tileable footprint, one thing we could still do, I guess, is instead of having it tile here, let me move this down 1. And the reason I think that will be beneficial for us is I can fit this underground here, which I mean this is even more compact, so to speak. That introduces that problem that I had before. So let's move this up 1, move this in here, move this up, and then that allows me to fit, let's see, can I get more beacons around it? And then this is still here. This is now 8 beacons, like 4 that I wanted, so that's 8. And that's because now this beacon is touching it, which is great. So that's even more compact. That leaves room for this side for basically putting anything that we want to in there. So let's just go ahead and put this in here so we can simulate this. So now we're seeing that this can now fully satisfy. Timing wise, this is overproducing, which is great. And then this can make 30 steel per second, which is awesome. So then what I'd want to do is, I mean, we can even bring this in closer and if we want to. So just slap this in here like this. So now let's see if this is fully tileable, and I think it is. You can flip this around like this, and then yeah, that's awesome. So this will work, and then we just need to get it until we have effectively enough. So we know it's 30 per second for each one. So then where is this fitting in? There and there. So 30, that's 120 there, 120 there. Perfect. So that's already, I think, just size-wise, a lot smaller than the previous blueprint. Yeah, by a significant margin, taking 2 from each side. So that's pretty nice. So we can just take this same, kind of copy this in here, and then we just need to move this slightly over just so that that fills in. And then the only thing that I really have left to do for this is I just have to redesign this. So now I need power distribution. So what I think I'm going to do for this is I'm going to grab, I don't think I'm going to have enough space. I'd like to send wires across here if possible. So that might be nice. I could put a substation here, I guess, and that would be another way to do this. And that actually would fully cover both sides. I'm just going to go with, and this is mostly just an aesthetic choice. I'm going to go with just placing them on each one like this, and that's just a personal preference. You may not like that choice, but I'm going to do that. And the main reason is it just perfectly covers from edge to edge the power there. So that will do that. That'll cover all the power that we need. And then the nice thing too is if I ever need to sneak past this another belt or something, like let's say, you know, because I'm thinking I'm going to have to run stone and a bunch of other things across here, we can easily do that for the actual final build. So that allows me a little bit more flexibility and allows me to get the power a little bit further over. So I'm liking that. So now this all works. I'm going to grab the same clocks that we had before. So these are really simple clocks that we already set up in the previous video. So I'm not going to go over it. But just here, one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to read the inputs from this. So read the inputs included in the crafting. And then hopefully, because of how much more compact this is, we can just fit this all the way across. So that's awesome. Cool. So that clocks all those. Then what I can do pretty easily here is I just have to bring this, and let's put this over here just for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wire all these up first because I need, what I'm going to do too here is whenever it's an input, if I can, I'm going to use a red wire just personally for my own sanity, because this is going to get more and more complicated as we go. So this is considered from a belt, putting in an input. So this is going to be green. And then the output going into steel is going to be red. Even though it's considered an input for steel, I could argue one way or another, but I'm just going to consider it that way. And then finally, this is going to be again an output, so that one's also going to be red. Cool, so we have this clock here. We're going to set up another clock, and I'm going to wire it now again into the steel as the input, and I'm going to care about that. So I'm going to say whenever the iron plates are less than, and I'll look at the insertion limit, this is 50, so we'll just do 50 minus 16. And then I'm going to output a check mark. Cool. And I'll wire this up now to this line. Cool. So then that one works. And then finally, I just need one more for the steel. Whenever this is greater than or equal to 16, I'm going to want to output a check mark. And that is because that's the amount that the stack inserter can actually hold. So we're going to put that in there. So that hooks all that up. So this wiring all these, the rest of these is pretty straightforward. We just copy this over here. And then we just need to bring these lines over. So this is also pretty easy. That's why these poles are here. Makes our lives easy. And then we'll just connect all those up. And then we'll just do the green wire over here. In case you're kind of confused what I'm doing here, go watch my lead follower video. This explains what this concept is and why this is a pretty good method for clocking your inserters compared to traditional clocks. So definitely go check that out. All right, so finally then, this is pretty simple. You can bring this over here and move this in, and then just have an output just so we can watch it, monitor, and test it. So go ahead and run this, and everything stopped. Why did everything stop? Because, oh, I never connected this wire. That would make sense. There we go. I'm good. Now we can see it from a complete stop point. Okay, so everything is filling up. There's no gaps in the belt. That's great. And all the inserters are swinging at the same time. Wonderful. So now we have a much more compact seal smeltering array, and compared to the previous one. So I'll save this as a V3 and I'll update my blueprints for that. So go check out the lead follower furnaces if you're interested in more of this. So we're going to move on to trying to fit stone along here as well. So for the next part, what I know I'm going to need is I'm going to need a lot more of this. We're going to need to basically get to the point where we're making, 960 per or 1000 per second. So we're not going to get away with just copying 4 of these. We're going to need this plus a little bit extra. So for the design of this, the way that I'm thinking about this is let's copy just half of this for now. And I won't grab even the clocked version of it, the lead side. I'm just going to grab one side. So what I'm thinking with this, especially because we're going to be running stone along it, one easy thing we could do is just copy this and stack it. The problem is we're not going to be able to get quite enough of the, basically the inputs, like the raw ore that we're going to need for this side. So we're really going to have to run like effectively like a full belt then over here. And that's fine. We can run a full belt that will go all the way along here. And then that will feed all the way to the top. And then once we get halfway, so these four, I'm going to kind of want to rotate this and split it so that it can run maybe alongside it like this here. So the way that I'm imagining that, let me clean up these wires because this is no longer necessary. And then I can just daisy chain these so that'll be the full stack here. So one thing that I'm thinking about that'd be really convenient, because every single recipe that we talked about previously over here that is going to require steel is also going to require stone at some point. So running those alongside each other is just going to be beneficial regardless. So, and especially since they're already split belts, that pretty much everything is going to need like a split belt in general. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to already make the call that I am going to, when I'm running this, I'm going to want an input here that is going to be uncommon stone. And I'm going to want it on the, not the, basically the left-hand side of this. So we'll run that already in here. That's going to allow me to run this all the way along and then put steel on there. However, we know that this side here is already going to make 120 items per second. So that would already split off here and be done. So what we can do then is let's break the belt and merge it over here. That's going to allow us to output easily just all the way until the end and then have an output. That's perfect. And then I will have this one also as an output. And I'm going to kind of, what I'm going to want is I want them always to be on the same side of the belt. I'll explain what I mean here in a second. But let's go ahead and just add the lead side for this just so that we can monitor this, just to make this simple. So let's go ahead and connect that. Now all of these will run and will fill up, and we should see steel coming here on the outside. Cool, perfect. And just let that run. So this is going to allow now, and I'm going to now need to run one more of these half belts, which is pretty easy. We can just copy these in here. And then finally, yeah, well, oh, this is going to be kind of tough. I'm going to need it. Oh, this shouldn't be too bad. Yeah, we could just do, oh, no, that's not going to work either. So effectively then, I might want to run it not directly in line here, but maybe run it on another side. So I've thought about it for a second, and I realized what I'm just going to do is just punt on the decision, and I will figure it out later. So I know that I'm going to need at least one whole belt that's going to come out here. So I'm going to just mark this here for now. I will figure that out later. Maybe I'll run it along here or something, and then we'll figure that out. But that's kind of what I'm thinking for right now. So what I'm going to do is I want per side, I actually want them to be on the same side. And the reason for that, and I'll delete these wires because we no longer need them. And I'll remove this as well. And this is fine, actually. I guess we could keep these in here because I'm going to need to run these over and connect these. So, and then we can just copy this and paste that in there. So the reason I'm going to want them finally when they're outputting always on the same side is because that's going to make it easy when you flip them, as opposed to this design. If I ran them, they would be on opposing sides, and then merging them or joining them with the splitter is just way harder, right? So like if I do this, and then let's say I copied this over here and pasted it here, and then let me copy this, rotate it. There we go. And paste that in there. When this comes out, because they're mirrored, they're going to be on opposite sides. So if I wanted to go and let's say merge them for whatever reason, or want to use this like this is going to be all wacky now. That's fine if you like just chaos, but I don't, so I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just copy it and move it over one, so that way they're always on the outside, and then I can put a splitter in here, no problem. I won't be doing that because I am going to need a full lane of stone, but this is kind of like the concept, so we'll figure that out in a second. So this is already the full bank that's going to be making here 480, but now it's more compact, and I'm going to need one more to get us all the way up to 960. So let me copy this side here because this is the side without the lead follower. I could merge this all the way in here, but for this video, I'm wanting to use these over silos to insert and move things over. And this operates on a 2 grid. So what I mean by that, you can see here, like, this is not going to perfectly be symmetrical if I make it on a basically like a 3 pattern, because like these are 3 tiles in width and this is on a 2 tiles in width kind of pattern. So to make the later design symmetrical, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to offset it and move it totally over here. Yes, I know that's more beacons, but it's gonna, I think, work out in the end. I don't need to do it for both sides, I just need to do it for one. But that just means that this is going to allow me now to easily be symmetrical and to be more specific. Let's say I take this whole thing, cut it, and then I place these 2 in here just to have it on the correct grid length. Now this actually will be symmetrical with the grid pattern that exists for cargo wagons. So that's something that I'm going to be doing for this video to make this, or for this design to make it easier. So now all I got to do then is just connect all these wires up, and I'll just have the one side because in theory everything should be constantly consuming everything at the same time, and you get a better benefit from lead follower inserters if you're actually moving everything over and properly, and like having just one as the lead. I'm realizing now that I forgot to wire all these up, so that's annoying. So I'm gonna go do that, finish this up, and then I'll have a final design here in a second. Okay, so we have now a design that perfectly is making 960 items per second. It's not going to be quite enough because what I'm going to need is I'm going to need one more end module that is going to allow us to output just a little bit extra. So that's kind of weird because we're going to need basically just one more of this head module, and I think that'll get us enough for each side. So if I do this, let's delete these, and I'm going to delete all this, and then let me just copy blankly just this section, and I'll just move it up here. Now, if I run this, if I look at the total amount of output that I'm going to create, this is going to be 1090. So it's a little bit overkill for what I need, but it's going to be at least easy enough to do. If I took this, and let's say I took this middle module out, gotta be careful about beacon placements here. And I calculate this is 1030. So that's actually better because it's one less furnace and we're just off by 1. We really could just remove this and it'd be centered, but I think this design here will be enough to cover our basis and get us to the 1000 mark, so that's pretty good. I might keep the middle portion here, just eliminating another item would be good, but I have to think about it. With all these designs, one of the things that's kind of difficult for me to do kind of on camera, and I'll be just honest about it, is that I have to like really think through like the full configuration, and so doing it live and also respecting your time is a little bit more challenging. So, but I'm just gonna still do my best to explain it as I go through it. So, and hopefully in editing be able to make it respectably, not too long, but long enough to be able to explain the details, but not go too in-depth to bore you. So this would be overkill, but well, I'll keep this here just as a potential running mate here. Now, one of the things I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to output this slightly differently. Like, I don't want this constantly on here. So, like, this is gonna be over the amount that's on this, because this is now gonna be producing 150 instead of 120 per second. So I'm probably gonna want this, and I'm going to want this to kind of output somewhere up here just to have an extra lane. And then what I could do then as well is do the same thing down here. Let's say I do that. And I could easily just bring this over and bring this in. And then that will be one extra lane compared to this as well. It just gives me a little bit more of an output. And then be just this, because it really just needs like a little bit extra. So this would be making 60 per second. And I think that's fine. We'll see if we refine it here in a little bit. But I'm going to call that good enough, and I will copy this over, move that onto this side, and then that can output like this. Perfect. So, yeah, and technically, I really want to consider removing this middle section because I don't think it's necessary. So I think this works. This makes definitely enough steel, and this is a good design. I do need to figure out how to snake the other materials through here. So what I think I'm going to do is I will, again, punt on getting the stone out. I will figure out the probably complicated gymnastics that we're going to have to do with the, like, kind of some balancing math and making our own balancer here to output the items appropriately, because the next component is going to need like 100 per second of these items. So again, it's not a correct like 120 ratio. So this is not going to be perfect to go through. So let's start working on on crafting the uncommon steel furnaces next. So the next part, I've already done a little bit of pre-work here. I've created a couple combinators here that already are going to be for wiring up a lead follower setup. Chosen a couple common ratios here, and I'll explain those here in a second. But in essence, what we need to do is just create a assembler that can make 10 items per second, and I'd like to make that as 4 of them. And the reason just being for that, because we can put stone in here, for example, and what I know is when we are going to be making 10 per second, right? Like if I just slap this around here until we get enough of a ratio. So let's just get this kind of close enough to get this to the point where it's like almost 10. That's close enough. So when we're actually at 10, we're going to see here that if I go and grab rate calculator, we're going to need 100 items per second to get 10 electric furnaces. So that also means 100 stone bricks per second. So in order to craft that, we're like the max that you can probably get out of this stone furnace here. If we look at this, let's say I just fully surrounded with beacons here. And that's fine. So we're going to get just over 50 per second if it's max beacon. So we can take one away and we'll be just still at 50. So that's fine. And that leaves us enough output to be able to directly insert this now here into this. So that, and in essence, then what I'm thinking is I'm going to grab 2 electric furnaces and directly insert it into here. So to do this, then kind of the way that I'm thinking about laying this out is I'm going to need a couple inputs. So I'm going to need somewhere on the top here, let's say I'm going to need this, and then on the bottom I'm going to need one more for this. So we'll move this here and move that there. I'll remove this conditioned, and we'll just feed this in here just to make this simple. So I don't necessarily need steel on this belt. The convenient part is because all stone and steel are going to run together coming out of the furnaces is my thought. So I kind of want this set up already. And then one of the things that exists here, let's figure out, I'll just leave this for now and we can remove it if we don't need it. So I'm going to put this in here and we will try to fit as many beacons around this as possible. So let's try, I'm thinking I'm going to just center this here so that both of these are getting touched by this beacon. So I'll consider these the primary and this is the secondary that I need beacons for. Let's get this all the way around until I can reach it fully here. So we'll copy this, perfect. And then what I'll do is let's just get this all the way around here. We can move this over for now. And then I'll leave some space just so that we can have a little bit of room just for this line to go through, just to make this easy for right now. So when this is running at full speed, this is 60 per second that these need to pull. So these inserters really can't pick up, like we're not going to be able to deliver 60 items per second to both of these, because this is when this is fully stacked, we're only going to get 120 and we need slightly over that. So that means that we're effectively going to need another inserter somewhere in another belt that's running. So really, if let's say we had 2 of these, because that's actually what we're going to need, we could then move this over and bring this in here, and then also rotate, bring this up here. So that's going to allow us to get to the max speed that we're actually going to need. And then I've created this clock here for this because if you look at like the max amount of insertion limit here, this is going to be 78 that you can put in here. And so just all I've done already pre-work here is I've, max beacon minus 16, that's 62. So that's basically the when to actually put something in there. And these are all then maxed and set to check signal is going to be greater than 0. So I'm going to go ahead and wire these up and connect them all so that they're both following this one inserter. So that's done with the furnaces. The next thing I'm going to need is pretty simply like a red belt to come in. So I need, and the convenient part about having steel already on the line, and the reason that I'm making this a preference is that everywhere that we're doing this, you're just going to need steel anyway. And this is going to need 100 items per second, and we're not going to be able to pull 100 items off of a belt with steel, so we're going to need at least another one, and then conveniently, this is already on this belt. So just in general for Purple Science, running steel and stone together just makes all the designs easier because like every single design is going to need that. So all the way from rails and also making the electric furnaces, right? So that covers that input, all those inputs that we're going to have. So then I can move this in here, make this a little bit smaller. Cool. We can even mirror that on the other side if we really want to. And we could delete this, and then we have room for another beacon if we wanted to, which is convenient because that'll get us actually up to the 50 that we need. So that's perfect. So now in essence, we have a pretty easy pattern for bringing this in. And this is the reason why I was saying on the outputs coming from our steel furnaces, I wanted to make sure that on the left-hand side, so that I can mirror this design, I want them always to be on the same side. And that was just kind of thinking ahead, knowing that we're going to be designing something like this, that I don't want them to be rotated because then it'll be all mixed matched and really hard to kind of like mirror the design afterwards. So the next thing I'd need is some kind of red circuits to come in here, and pretty easily one of the ways that we could do this is we could just bring this in here and just bring that in there. So then perfect. The problem is I'm going to need to bring this out somehow. So the issue that I'm going to have, and I'm just going to mark this to make this easy for me to distinguish of what I'm going to need here. So grab this, put this in here so I can easily see it. I need somewhere to put this out. I could put this here. That's fine. And then do something janky like this. But then the next one is not going to have an output, so that's kind of weird. So even though this isn't symmetrical, I could just move this easily up here. And that's fine. And then I can move this in here. And again, I want to kind of side load this. So I'm thinking that the way that I'm going to want to do this is, and we can decide on this later, but I want to put this in here on the outside lane because then, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. We can do this on the outside to start. And then what I'll do is I'm going to grab this whole entire module here and I copy it over 1. So we can even just flip this if we wanted to make this kind of mirrored. So now this can come in here like this, come on the outside. And because the reason I'm thinking already now to put this on the inside is just preferentially later I'm going to say we move this out here like this. I'm going to have to make a module which is here for making these. And my thought is it'd be nice to like potentially just put it right here. And then this would be right in line so that this can be placed on the inside lane. So I'm only going to like, and then just kind of stack them like this. That's kind of my thought right now. We'll see how we were when we get to there. But that's kind of why I'm putting on the inside lane versus the outside lane. So that's kind of the thought that I have. So that should be enough. And I don't think we need the full capacity here. I think We'll need slightly more than this, but not a full 240 because each one of these is going to just need 100. So just a half belt should be enough for both these sides to get this in there. And we'll simulate this just running constantly and just make sure that we're good. And I'm realizing I'm just going to have to copy this over and place that in there. Cool. We could technically make this slightly more compact like this, and then bring this whole thing in here like this, and just do the same thing on the other side. Doesn't truly matter, so that's fine. The nice thing now, what we can do is we can add some of the wonderful power poles, so I'll just slap these in here because there's a convenient spot for them. And then I can remove this, and I'll move this down here, and then I'll just move these in here, so then that all is connected. And then the nice thing is we can run now our wires across and connect all of these, so they're all running at the same time. So now we can see they're explicitly turning on just when needed and bringing them in. So that's perfect. The item then that I need to still figure out is clocking the rest of these. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this output here, and I'm going to connect this now on the, specifically onto the making what is making currently the stone bricks. So what I'm gonna do is let's figure out the number that we're gonna need. So this is already, if you're looking at this, this is already too much, right? This is making 11.5 per second. And ideally, I'd like to have it an exact ratio. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove these two modules and let's see where we're at. This is making exactly 10 per second. So that's actually pretty awesome. What we can do is then we could fill the rest if we wanted to, just with efficiency modules. And we can do the same thing over here. Just like this. And that should mean now, ratio-wise, if we look at rate calculator, we're at just an ever so slight positive side. So we're making just slight basically per minute, we're making 27 extra out of the 6,000 stone per minute that we need. So that's perfect. So that means that every so often these inserters don't have to swing, because this will eventually get to the point where this is completely maxed out. So what I'm going to want to do then is simply put here, what we can do is here, I will remove, let's say we can read from this furnace, and whenever this is, because this is going to be almost supply limited, whenever this is greater than or equal to 16, that's when I'm going to want to output this. So I'm going to connect this and connect this. And so now we're seeing that this will now on an interval insert it. And we're still like over capacity, so that's fine. One thing that I want to kind of check is what happens if this gets fully back pressured and these are completely full. So one thing that can happen when you do that is now if you let it run all the way until it's full capacity, this should always enable those inserters because they'll be slightly over, because we know there's that slight positive number. But looking at this, it seems like I'm not seeing the wake list, so that seems like that is completely fine. It's not ever pausing, but it is constantly pulsating like this. So let's see if I can make this better by monitoring instead the inputs that are going into the furnace. So the max insertion limit here is 130. What I could say is whenever this is less than 130 minus, there's gonna be two of them, right? So minus 32. Whenever this is less than 98, I want this to run. And that will eliminate this flickering that's going on and off all the time. And that makes a little bit more sense because once, and like I would recommend to do that with all the builds, is let them run until the science is complete, like everything is fully stopped and has completely saturated. Because you run this long enough, eventually these will get to the state where these will be higher than 16 all the time. So if it's a positive like this, eventually after many, many, many minutes, you'll eventually, like hours, you'll eventually get to the point where this is almost at 100 constantly. And always just only pulling out when needed. So to balance that and make it happen faster, you can just read the inputs that are going into the electric furnace instead. So that's kind of a better way to control this. So now we can hook these up and we can just connect all of these up. That's perfect. These are ready. I did the pre-work of making sure that he had a check signal in here so that I don't have to add it to each one. So the next item would be the steel input, and that would be convenient. So what I'm going to do is let's just go and make this from scratch, and we'll just place it somewhere. I don't really care where. So we can connect this green wire in here, and then let's just figure out how much we can put in here. So the automated insertion limit is 130. So then again, it'll be, we'll take this number, and whenever this is less than 130 minus 32, because that's the amount that both of these inserters can put in, then we will just emit a check mark. And I'm going to wire these up. These can be green, these can be red. I'm just going to start making some things green so it's easier for me to see it. And we'll monitor in here, make sure this is constantly outputting at 10 items per second. And that's fine. Cool. And now we're seeing these pulse on and off constantly, and then I will connect all these up. So we should see these constantly now just swing just when this is now under, and this is constantly running. So good. The last thing that I'm going to need is an output for this, and this one's pretty straightforward. So let me remove all the extra clutter and noise that we have. I'm going to fit this here just because it's easier to get to. I guess I could put it here too. That doesn't really matter. We can connect this in here, and whenever this is greater than or equal to 8, then I want this to swing. And the reason that I'm going to do 8 is because we only need 40 items per second. So I'd rather this swing a little bit more. Maybe that's wrong. Let me just calculate how much we need for this. So this takes 10 steel as an input. So then this should, in theory, because this stacks up to 130, this should stop when it's at 13. So that looks good. All right, I'm going to call this a mini little module. So what we're going to need then is we're just going to need this on both sides, so we can just easily take this and flip it like this. And then in essence, I could actually wire all these up to share the same signals. I might just keep this just as one, basically on both sides, to kind of just, I'll leave these inserters in here for like, or the decider combinators in here for now for controlling everything. And then maybe I'll add it later in the final design, but I'll leave this here for now like this. So then what this would look like is then just this input here. And then what I can do is I can kind of copy this around, rotate this. I'll put that in there and in there. Perfect. So then this will then symmetry wise, this will mean that on the inside here, we're always going to be making first. I've got this all correct here. So why did this one stop? That's interesting. Let's go look. Oh, yeah, because I'm not supplying it red circuits. That would make sense. And when I supply red circuits, there we go. So now we have a decent module. So let's try to incorporate that now into our steel smelter. Okay, so this was one of the things that I was concerned about. So remember how before when we were talking about the furnaces, I was talking about this insertion limit? So you can see here, these machines got stuck. And why did they get stuck? Well, it's not really a guarantee that the items are going to stack higher than this amount here. And what I mean by that is if you look at here, the automated insertion limit, it's at 130 items. So if you look at the electric furnace, right, we can make up to, like, it takes 10 items to go and craft that. So that means that when this output gets stuck like this, what really is going on is that this can stack on, like, normally this will stack all the way up to 13 is basically going to be the amount that can be there. They can be slightly higher, slightly lower sometimes, but that means that you're kind of in a dangerous amount if you set the condition that we have here to anything that is over the amount that would be the automated insertion limit divided by the recipe. So really what I should be doing here is I can keep this as a stack size of 16, but I'm just going to make this so that it's greater than or equal to 8. And that's just so that this runs, basically it picks it up for a tick, and then on the next cycle it'll pick up the remainder. So this should be 8 and then 16 every single time. Which is fine because it's still, the amount of animation is still lowered by doing that, but it removes that potential scenario where this will go and exceed the stack size limit. So if you were around and you watched my chemical science where I created that like workaround with the worker, or reading the working signal, this is actually the true way to completely get around it, is just looking at this number, and then you don't have to have one extra signal that it's monitoring. So that is something that I discovered after talking with Konich for a little bit, and he explained to me that mechanic. So hats off to him, and thank you for explaining that. So now we have, and I think this is going to bother me because this is a little bit off, but that's okay. The symmetrical in essence. Now, this is going to get real complicated. So what I'm going to do is spare you some of the gymnastics that I'm going to have to do to get this to evenly distribute between all of these. And I'll just show a version here after this is probably going to take me a couple hours to finally figure out a good balancing mechanism to get this to be here and only grab effectively the 120 items per side, or a little bit extra, and then feed the rest along the side for the rest of the science. Because we know this is making enough, but I need to output it here so that we can fill the rest of the machines that are going to need it upstream. So I'll go ahead and do that now. All right, so after a bunch of complicated belt math that I did, I've found a ratio that is going to work out pretty well. So create 2 different versions. I previously mentioned that there's going to be one too many steel furnaces here. So this here can make 1030, whereas this fully symmetrical one is overkill. It has 2 extra steel furnaces that we don't need. I'll see how this works later on downstream more practically, but kind of just looking at this, the way that I have kind of set this up is to make this relatively simple. I've already fed all the other materials in here to keep this kind of manageable. So I already pre-calculated how much I'm going to need for each of these belts. And then I've split them consistently here so that we have iron coming in here. We're going to want a split belt of iron and copper to be used downstream later, because we're only going to probably need like a half belt of iron or a full belt per side, but then having this makes it so that it's going to be symmetrical. I'm thinking we're going to only need this amount. We'll see later. So that is my kind of thought. And when I mentioned before, the nice thing about kind of making this one off like this is that we could easily fit a belt in here, which I've done. And then, so that's going to route all the copper and iron ore to the sides. And then we're going to have one tiny half belt of coal is all we're going to need. And even less than that because of just the only thing this is going to be used for is to make plastic. So I've done some magic belt weaving to make these 2 sides symmetrical. I don't know if that has any UPS benefit or hurts, but it's what I've done. So then what I'm doing then from here is I have mirrored the sides because I've decided that I want them to be on the outside. This can be easily flipped because this is reversible, so I don't care, but I'm going to keep it this way. So all the things that we saw when we designed this module is all still here. And then finally, the way this is working is because we need just slightly over 240 items per second. So if you're looking at this, we need 200, so not quite for half a belt, but not quite a full belt. So that's why it's this starting and stopping sensation is kind of going on. So I've made these as the priority. These are going to output on both of these sides for both halves so that it's evenly distributed. I want them to come out here and go into the assembly machines, and I've purposely terminated them and not let them continue to run. Then the outputs, anything that is not priority is going to get fed back into here, and I've effectively just made it so that the input priority is always going to be the additional little bit of steel that we need, which is then going to be fed in here, and the extra line of stone that we're going to wind up needing is then going to balance through and is as a priority input going to be fed in here so that we constantly have the amounts that we're going to need downstream. I know this looks like this isn't quite enough, but the way that I did the math, this is the thing that I need to watch, is just that these are always just running in this whole belt setup. As long as these are constantly running and there's no flow rate issues, then even if this stone kind of starts and stops, which it will, the rest of these will all just flow through naturally and won't be blocked later downstream if they're being fully consumed. In reality, they're not going to need this much. This is just going to need to offset the deficit that we're going to need in the end for the rest of the materials, but so this not being a priority or not being completely full is going to be fine, and they should even out at the end. So that is this design. This is the other one that just includes all the steel, and then you can see the same kind of sorting system up here. I think this is all we're going to need, and then keep it within the same width. So now we have a decent kind of footprint to make this wider. So comparing this real quick to the original Purple Science that I wound up creating, don't look at that one. So this one here, for example, and can I, oh, I have to have it in a charted area. So already just looking at this footprint wise, even if I use this one, this is including this module all the way up here that makes the actual furnaces. And I don't have the liquid, so if I just looked at the steel assembly, this is already a lot narrower and it's getting all the materials in, so this is already a good start. So in the next video, we're going to focus on a couple things. So in the next video, what I'm going to want to focus on is designing the red circuits, green circuits, creating plastic. We'll decide which one of these I'm going to use. I haven't quite decided yet. In theory, one of these would be enough, and it'd be nice if I can make it work. But it also might be nice to just do direct insertion with this, so we'll see. And then finally, creating the head module to actually make the science. So stick around and we'll get into that in the next video. Hopefully this style, I've decided to split this up into 2 videos so that it's a little bit shorter in length and easier to consume and follow along rather than having to watch the entirety of the video. So if you like this kind of format of kind of breaking this up so that I can go a little bit more in detail, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, subscribe and follow if you are interested in seeing the next portion of this video and ultimately the design series where I am optimizing my science build so that I can ultimately continue to expand my megabase. Thank you so much for watching. My name is abucnasty. Have a fantastic day.